Welcome, data enthusiasts. We are Zuma, the recruitment agency focused 100% on data tech professionals in and around the Berlin region. And this is our podcast, Data for Good, connecting you with all things data. And today I'm joined by Rishat. Forgive me, Rishat. I'm going to have another go. Rishat Iskhakov. How did I do?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. And Rishat, you are VP of Analytics at OSOME, and OSOME is, of course, the fintech and accounting platform, global reach and globally remote workforce of around 500 people and a data team of around 10, 11 people. How are those facts and stats?
Yeah, absolutely correct. We are actually above
Awesome.
500. Yeah.
Brilliant. How's it going today, Rishat? And where are you talking to us from today?
Oh, good. So I'm currently in Dubai, UAE, traveling around the world. I've been to 17 countries this year.
Ay, ay, ay. You're going to, as we hit late autumn and winter, we're getting cold and the days are getting a little bit gloomy. So you're making me envious.
Yeah. So basically for Dubai, the winter is the season. So it's now getting like around 27. So appropriately hot. So you can go
Yes.
outside at least.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, super. Let's get into today's topic then. And today's topic is a question. Should the data team be a cost center or a profit center? And if it is a profit center, I'd like to understand a little bit more about how. So let's start by the context, as always. Why is this topic so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, the 2022 started pretty heavily for most of the companies, especially with the money not being free for all. So investment rounds were tough. Basically, everyone started focusing on profitability. And by doing so, everyone had to look at their profits on costs. And of course, the data team is a very difficult one, and everyone try to look at it from different perspective. One is that it's a cost center, and another one that it's a profit center. And actually, it became very important for the data teams to be able to prove that they bring value to the organization and to reduce their costs. Because basically, data team spent a lot of money on the infrastructure as well. So yeah, the topic is very important. I've seen lots of companies doing different optimizations in terms of how they approach the data and what they do in order to make sure that data teams stay profitable, let's say, as a teams within their organizations.
This is a very relevant topic, you're right, not just across Berlin startups and scale-ups and enterprises, not just across Germany, but across Europe and even globally. And I think it's been a very relevant topic for almost a year. So I hope you can share some learnings today, and I hope other businesses might be able to use those learnings, data team members as well as leaders. So I should imagine, well, you mentioned the data team. There's a lot of cost as per the infrastructure. I think we need to identify those costs. So, maybe in list format, can you give us a few examples of those costs as a data team?
Yeah, so basically everything starts with infrastructure. We need 2 servers to store the data, to process the data, to do the export loading. I would say like basic examples are Google BigQuery, Snowflake, Redshift, Amazon Redshift, or some on-premise installations of different data warehousing solutions. So this is the first one, and usually one of the biggest, basically parts of the cost, just to transfer or collect all the data, store and process it, to build something useful out of the raw data that we receive. We need those tools, and they cost a lot. This is the first one. The second one, I would say data tools, basically something that analytics team usually uses business intelligence, like Tableau, Looker, Sisense, or other different tools for data processing, exploratory data analysis, like Cloud, Jupyter Notebooks, data catalogs, like Amplitude Mixpanel for event collection, then some other maybe specific tools for data quality, data orchestration, etc. So those two things are the key costs. And of course, the third one is people in the team. So this is also the cost of the data team. And in total, this is usually quite a lot of money goes through in organization. So data team is usually around 10% of product and tech. And then data infrastructure is more than double of the cost of the data team. That's why it's very important to understand the consequences of what we use and for what we use, and to make sure that the costs are being, also the money being spent efficiently. So every CFO would want to ask, like, are the investments worth spending? So basically, is it worth to have the data team and all the costs associated with this data processing, etc.?
You mentioned the CFO there. How much exposure and knowledge do other business unit leaders have of the costs and the values associated with data?
Yeah, so usually CFO questions the spendings, at least in our organizations or in the organizations where I've been. And for the rest of the units, data is usually the team which provides the value. That's why they actually don't know how much is being spent on this value. They only know the results, the output. And of course, for data leaders, it's very important to maximize the output for the money they spend, both on infrastructure, tools, and the teams.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. You mentioned three big areas there: infrastructure, tools, and people. That sounds pretty reasonable to me. How are we able to analyze these and even bring these costs down?
Yeah, so in terms of, if we start with tools, so there are very different models, and there is no like silver bullet to cut all the costs. But basically at OSOME, we've been able to decrease the costs for data, tools, and infrastructure by 50%, just by going out and doing what we are best at data analysis and analyzing our usage, our spends. So basically we know, for example, that Google BigQuery bills us for the slot usage. So basically slot is a unit of data processing, some very specific to BigQuery. And we went to see, okay, what are the queries which consume most of the slots, or what are how often do we run them? And then you just take one query and try to analyze it. What's inside it, what's happening in it, and is there a way to optimize it? And so you just have the list, and it's usually 80-20 rule. So 20% of things you do generate are responsible for 80% of the costs associated with it. And by simply cutting or optimizing the specific set of, let's say, queries, data jobs, data models, you achieve a significant results in terms of costs. And then there are different models. So this one is, for example, pay for usage. So how much you consume of data processing, that much you pay. Then there are models built on the user license model. Simple example, almost all of the BI tools are built this way. Like bill customers for something. And they are built for license. And we had an example with Looker where we had lots of people who are not using the tool being active, having active licenses. So basically we are paying like $20, $100 every month for them, and they're not using the tool. So we simply went disabling them, and basically they have the same experience. They never used it. Now they do not have the access to it, but we don't pay for them. And we just made sure that we have established the process. If they need something, they can. Go and ask, create a Jira ticket, and then we'll give them the license if needed. Yeah, so it's just simple as that, but it takes some time. So you have to dedicate your time and energy to do the optimizations towards the data costs.
Interesting. So you mentioned a 50% drop across tools. How about infrastructure? And dare I say,
so it's both
people?
Tools and infrastructure. In terms of the people, we are the same team as we've been when I joined. So this is another topic. It's like, so cutting tools is very easy, and it was done basically mostly by me and data engineer in my team. I would say mostly by data engineer in my team and then me. Then the rest is the team. And for the team, you have to make sure that the rest of the organization understands its value, the value they bring to the table. And this is where I think the difference comes in whether the data team is being associated as a cost center or as a profit center.
I feel like looking at the data, those challenges are a topic onto itself, because there can obviously be some friction across the business when they're not seeing the value from the data people. So it's important that those data members are promoting themselves, educating the business, and showing their worth. How can data team members do that?
Yeah, so in order to promote something, you should first make sure that there is something to promote. Mm-hmm. And this is where I see the biggest differentiator in the team. There are two types of teams. The first one is basically the teams which are doing something like dashboard builders, I would say. Their main goal is so their key output is a dashboard, just something in BI tool. And there is another set of teams which I call like insights producers, or let's say insight producers. So basically the team which produce some sort of an insight, the idea how the business can be improved. And this is the differentiator. It's very important for the teams to produce the insights which bring the value to the organization. Like basically an insight might be something, some idea, or data finding. It might be a dashboard as well, but it should be focused specifically towards bringing value to the business and specifically to the business P&L, meaning improving the business revenue or driving down the costs. So this is where I see the value.
Interesting. Okay. We've looked at these areas being a cost center and bringing those down. The data team members, they can do that themselves. You mentioned that the infrastructure and tools was a bunch of decisions that you made. Can data team members or the business get involved proactively in terms of reducing those infrastructure and tooling costs? Or do you believe that that's a decision that's solely handled by data leadership?
I would say it's my job to make sure that my team has the best tools they need in order to do research and drive the insights, so to improve the business outcomes. And it's my sole responsibility to make sure that the costs for the tools I introduce to the team are reasonable. I'm absolutely happy if someone from my teams brings certain ideas saying, let's introduce this, or let's do this, or this tool is not very useful because something. And it's just purely my job to make sure that the tools we use, basically the infrastructure I defined, is very useful and it's cost effective.
Right. Okay. So we've looked at the cost center aspect, and we've looked at what the costs are, who makes the decisions, and how they are made. Can we flip this and now look at the potential profitability of a data team or a data ecosystem? Yeah, how do we break this down? Should we look at what the potential profit-making gains are, and then we'll look at how, and then we'll look at who?
I would say there are two directions we might consider. The first one is basically each data team member, product analyst, data analyst is a part of some unit, of some product team. And basically the role of the analytics team in the product team is to improve the metrics of the team and to generate the ideas, to find insights in the data about how some things can and should be improved. This is one specific topic, basically about improving P&L by doing something as a part of the product team. The other part might be related to the data monetization. It's not the case for OSOME as a fintech right now, but it used to be the case at my previous company where we did a grocery, and data monetization was a very huge topic because basically we had a lot of data about consumer behavior, and then we could create some dashboards, some insights for the producers of the food, and we could have sold it to them and monetize our data this way. And this was also the responsibility of the data team. So in this speech, I would prefer to consider the first area, although the second one is very important as well. And the data team might be able to generate some ideas of how the data they possess can be useful not only to the business itself, but to some other businesses outside of specific company. So in my case, with a grocery company, it was the FMCG producers. So basically the producers of goods, and they needed the data about the consumer, how they behave in the internet, basically, in the electronic stores and shops. And the first one is about analytics and how they can bring value to the business itself by just driving the insights.
Interesting. So how can it help how can insights help the organization to impact profit and loss and cash flow, for example, specifically?
Yeah, so first we need to define what's the insight. In my perspective, it's some data-based assumption or idea about how we should change the certain things or processes within the organization or within the product itself to get more value out of the product, or basically to improve the metrics. So this is the insight. And the goal for the team is to go and search for them, specifically related to their area of responsibility. For example, at OSOME, accounting team is focused on costs. So basically we have lots of operational processes and the costs associated with them. And data analytics team can go and analyze the behavior of the accountants to see what they spend their time on and to find specific areas which can be optimized, for example, technologically using AI, or just by removing the process or simplifying the process so that accountants spend less time on it. And by doing so, they found an insight. They say, okay, 10% of time is being spent on process X, and we can remove the process at all, or we can improve the process introducing some feature to it. And this 10% would be cut or reduced by 100% or 90%. So instead of spending 10% of time doing this specific thing, they would be able to get more job done within the same period of time, which would increase productivity, which in the end would decrease the costs of the organization. So this is the insight which is data team can produce. And very simple example, and it's very important that the team should understand that this is their job to produce insights like this.
Yeah, and that works both ways. Not let me be specific. We can talk about the insights generated for operational or internal performance, but we can also talk about the insights generated for the business to go about its work, its product or service. So there's lots of areas that that insights could impact there. Does this differ much between startups, scale-ups, and enterprises, and even the whole approach to this?
I would say the approach should not be different. Basically, you have P&L, you have metrics. You should understand the key metrics, the ones which should be impacted, and to see how they drill down and what sub-metrics you can influence in order to improve the high-level metrics to the research. So my point is that analytics should do more research instead of dashboard building, etc. Then if analytics is doing research, that's good. The problem is that usually in startups, the data infrastructure, data culture are only on the very beginning. So they don't even know the basics. They don't have the metrics ready. They don't have sub-metrics ready. So they have a very poor understanding of the business from the data point of view, because usually startups don't start with the data team. They usually start with the development, sales, operations, marketing, and only then data team appears. So I would say for startups, they might not be focused on the research. Then for scale-ups and enterprises, I think it's around the same. The only difference is that for scale-ups, the area of the researchers or potential insights is much greater, because basically they have not been able to optimize everything. So if we as a scale-up are focusing on major optimization, which can drive some metrics by tens of percents, then in enterprises, they would be looking like at 1% at maximum. So the changes or the insights they find will have less impact in terms of like relative numbers. But again, in absolute numbers, because just the user base, the revenues are higher. So 1% impact for the enterprise might be worth more than 10% for us. That's the only difference, but the processes should be the same. And I think they are the same.
Same fundamentals, potentially different priorities. And I think of the overall costs and impact that scale has on an organization. What can we say about the commercials of the data within the organization? Surely, if the team is highly effective at gathering, sorting, and using data, that data can then be used, and we see it with lots of companies, data being sold to external customers, whether that be B2B or even B2C. Is that easy to set, or is that particularly challenging to set up for an organization? I think we've lost your sound, Rishat.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm back. I have two mute buttons. So at OSOME, we never sold the data, and we don't intend to, as per the current strategy, or at least for my understanding of the current strategy. But at my previous company, at actually two back, so at Bear Market, we've sold the data to the consumers, so basically B2B. It was relatively easy to set up, so it's basically sales driven once again. So it's not the data person who goes and does the pitch to the companies, to the businesses. So yeah, I would say if you have a good sales team, they will be able to find where to sell the data. And this is not a very difficult task. So you just tag the data person along with the sales people, and the data person can tell you which specifically data can be organized into the dashboards, into the specific tools, which will be useful to the organizations, and the sales part is just to sell it.
Yeah.
So I would say it's relatively easy. Actually,
Yeah,
I've
okay.
spent like 3 months at Delivery Hero, basically in the ads department, which kind of the job of the ads department was to use the data in order to run ads efficiently. So it's kind of selling to the restaurant. So you basically provide the tool. So it's not specifically data being sold, like these are the clients and this is what they do, but you create some tools on top of the data you have, which provide some other value to the businesses. And this is also a very good data monetization area, which should be explored by the teams. Like, is there a tool you can create on top of the data you have so that other people will pay for it? You should not specifically sell your data. And I think it's illegal right now in Europe just to sell the data as it is. But you can build tools which will anonymously provide some value to the businesses. It's basically the ad platform. Google, Facebook, they all do the same. They have the data about the clients. And instead of just giving out the data to the companies which need advertising, they say, okay, you pay us money and we will show your ads to the specific set of people which need the advertisements so that your ad spend is efficient. So yeah, this is how it works. And this is another a bit more difficult, but good way to monetize the data. Yeah.
You mentioned salespeople earlier about how they can identify areas where data can help. With businesses that we see around Berlin having a real drive to be data-driven, I imagine data team members with particular commercial skills could then use data to identify new market opportunities themselves, as in addition to salespeople using data to find the opportunities. Have you seen that much to help them develop new products or services that the business isn't already doing?
Yeah, so it works to some extent, but usually it's more about qualitative data instead of quantitative, where you first have basically the same salespeople or user experience researchers who try to understand the patterns of the people, what they do, what they want. So they ask questions usually. And then once they find specific ways people behave, they want the data team to analyze this in details and gather more quantitative statistics about it. So I would say it's not the first idea which comes to mind, but rather the second. So first you gather the data qualitatively, and then you try to quantify it. And then you do something.
Interesting. My head is spinning with ideas, and I feel like this topic, the cost center topic, is one topic in itself, and the profit center topic is another one in itself. And there's lots that can be done. There's an abundance of opportunities there in both areas. I wonder, as we kind of round out the podcast and our time limit, I wonder what data teams could do right now for themselves to change and to be more successful, especially given the current economic climate.
I would say first focus on the value the data or the data person brings to the business. Then analyze everything, both business and the data processes as well, especially for the data leadership. So basically your job is to use your own data analytics skills to analyze the data team and how and what it does. So basically you have a P&L, and make sure that everyone in the team is laser focused on driving or improving P&L, cash flow of the companies, basically improving revenue and driving the costs down. I would say that's it. And go out and research, talk to people, ask people what they do to be successful.
Yeah. Understand the value, focus on culture, focus on research, respect. Excellent, Rishat. Thanks so much for sharing your insights today. There's a ton of stuff more that we could uncover. Let's save it to next time.
Okay.
All right. All the best, and thank you once again.
Thank you.